Good evening, everyone.
Yay!
Good evening. Thank you for joining us on this lovely, hot, sunny Wednesday evening. As always, if you're joining us live or if you're watching this on the catch up, we really appreciate you being with us. And we hope, again, that tonight, as always, is going to be another interesting session.
Yes.
I think it's another, I think, quite an interesting
I
topic.
think it's like if we started a series of like evangelization, healing,
Yeah,
your
I was
topic
thinking,
tonight.
he's about to reveal it. But yeah, so before we get into that, as Cannelle's kind of mentioned, 2 weeks back on our previous episode, we spoke about healing. We don't have a catch-up video this week, but Cannelle, what would you say was one of your highlights from that episode? Because I think it was a really good episode.
Mm. I really like the fact that we had stories of when healing didn't come, but then we still experienced some parts of miracles throughout, and that God still does answer and those things, even if it's not the full healing, whether it was me sharing or Joel sharing or Christina sharing or even Pastor David Lamb. And then I really liked, the second part where PT gave us his wisdom.
The wisdom was
Great teaching.
the wisdom was profound. It was amazing, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think what I really liked. And I'm not just saying this, but I think the way that you were very honest about your experiences, positive and negative, with healing. I noticed in the comments it opened up a really good discussion about people's experiences when they feel that they've had healing and people's experiences when they feel that they haven't, and how people deal with it both ways. And that was really encouraging for me to see, because I think it's not that we're going into it saying God can't heal, but of course sometimes in life things don't work out
Yeah.
how you think it was going to work out. And
Mm-hmm.
if we don't have these discussions amongst ourselves, you could be almost struggling and suffering in silence, as well as the physical things you might be dealing with mentally or spiritually. That's quite a hard thing to get around.
Yeah.
So I think to have those discussions
And it was a
is
good
really
thing
good.
it still reveals a lot about God's character, about his sovereignty, and lots of aspects of his character that we may not realize if we're going to it with the wrong mindset. So we definitely encourage you to go back on it.
Yep.
Check the 25th episode, which
Yep,
was
episode
called
25.
Faith, Illness, and Healing.
Healing. Exactly. Well, within that episode, a lot of, sort of people's experience of dealing with asking for healing are to do with praying to God. And so that's what this episode is going to be about tonight, is more specifically prayer. What is it? How do we use it? And again, a bit like last week, what are people's experiences with it? Whether it's what are the positives, whether the bits that there's elements of prayer that people find confusing, no matter what it is. Now, we'll try and address some of these points tonight. We have one of our good friends with us as a guest, which I think is going to be really insightful. I'm really looking forward to having that discussion. And again, as always, if you're joining us, please feel free as we're going along to put your questions and comments into the comment section, because again, I think the beauty of these episodes is not just the live bit that we're putting out, it's the whole discussion and the whole body of Christ, the church, getting involved and really starting to debate and discuss these things. And I think oftentimes I come away from these episodes and benefit just as much just by going back and reading through the comments. So please, be active. Feel free to join us in the comments.
Say hi if you're on there.
Say hi if you're with us. We've got Ian, I've seen Fani, Sharon, Rachel, and I've seen Cannelle has joined in the comments as well. So she's secretly under the table with the YouTube.
On YouTube.
But yeah, big welcome to everyone. Right, we've got definitely some interesting points to discuss tonight. But before we get into the meat of the subject, we've got a little video about prayer that we're just going to play. So Cannelle, if you could play that now, and then we'll be back after.
Prayers in the Bible are almost always directed to God. So prayer can be understood as any form of communication that is directed to God, whether it is expressed through our words or our thoughts. However, we should not merely direct our prayers to God, but we should acknowledge that He is our King and our God, as it says in Psalm 5, verse 2. Give attention to the sound of my cry, my King and my God, for to you do I pray. When Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, he said to them, And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord, And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, It is well spoken. So Elijah made a clear distinction between calling upon Baal and calling upon the Lord. He directed his prayer to the Lord his God, the only true God, and knew that he would receive an answer as he prayed. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. Indeed, God immediately heard and answered Elijah's prayer by sending down fire to consume his burnt sacrifice as well as everything around it. No other God can answer prayer the way that the Lord does. So as believers of God, we have the privilege of knowing that he is always near whenever we pray to him, as it says in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 7. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call upon him? There are many types of prayer in the Bible, such as supplication, intercession, confession, repentance, praise, thanksgiving, and the making of vows. But when we look at the most commonly used Greek and Hebrew words for prayer in the Bible, the predominant meaning of these words is a petition exclusively addressed to God, either on our behalf or on someone else's behalf. A petition to God is something that we ask of God, which we want him to hear or to answer. But this does not mean that our prayers should only consist of petitions. In our next video, we will discuss other reasons to pray, which go beyond petitions. In order for a petition to exist, there must be a request or a need. In fact, some synonyms for praying in the Bible include pleading, entreating, making an appeal, crying out to God, and seeking his face. This tells us that prayer is a recognition that we need God. Oftentimes we're weak and limited in our abilities, so we need to humbly seek the help of a God who is infinitely greater and more powerful than we are. This is exactly what King Asa did when he realized that he was outnumbered by the Ethiopians who had come to make war against Judah. He cried out to the Lord saying, O Lord, there is none like you to help between the mighty and the weak. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Let not man prevail against you. As we can see, prayer is a confession of our faith and trust in God. We need to not only have faith that God exists, but that he listens to our prayers. And we can confess this faith by praying to God and putting our trust in him. To trust in God means to completely rely on him and not on ourselves. When we do this, God will respond to our prayers the same way that he helped the Israelites. And they were helped against them, and the Hagrites were delivered into their hand, and all who were with them, for they cried out to God in the battle. He heeded their prayer because they put their trust in him. Besides putting our trust in God, we need to have faith that he will answer our prayers in his time. God answers prayers not only because he loves us, but because of his own faithfulness and righteousness, as it says in Psalm 143 verse 1. Hear my prayer, O Lord, give ear to my supplications. In your faithfulness answer me, and in your righteousness. In Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 12 to 14, God gave this promise to the Israelites. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you. And you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you, says the Lord. This promise, however, was not only given to them, but to all people. Prayer is a universal need, and God invites all people to seek him and to find him through prayer.
Simeon! Let's have a round of applause for Simeon, our special guest. So this
That was
is
a very weak applause.
I mean, there was only two of us to do it, but we did our best. So this is our good friend Simeon. A lot of you guys will know him. Yeah, a lot of you will have seen Simeon in the comments, but for those of you that don't know Simeon, tell the people about yourself, Simeon.
Hey, so I'm 29, been in Bright City for 8 years. I'm a teaching assistant, sports coach, kids movement practitioner, and yeah, love traveling, love food, love movies, and really passionate about working with kids and people.
Definitely. I mean, Simeon's probably the most passionate person I've ever met about working with children, would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Very passionate guy, very driven, determined guy. I know you've got a lot you're doing right now, a lot of exciting things. How's your week been? Anything exciting about the last week?
I've been sports coaching, so that's one of my jobs. I sports coach in half terms and children shooting up bullets at me and throw dodgeballs at my head, and I get mortified when it's hot enough, and it's crazy and goes from 8 a.m. till 4. But yeah, it's a laugh. Kids are great. Really nice.
Ian saying hi, Simeon.
Hey Ian. It's my third time. I don't know where to look.
Yeah, and also for some reason I've noticed the camera. You guys wouldn't have a clue what I'm saying, but it seems a bit. The position is different to normal, so we've all had to like move around a bit. I'm a bit boosted up on a chair right now because I was really low down, but we're gonna make it work.
An NHS t-shirt.
Yeah, we'll make it work. Well, Simeon, thanks so much for joining us.
No, really happy to be here.
Really pleased that you came. Oh, thank you, and don't be intimidated. The audience are lovely people.
Yeah.
But
That.
like I say, I think it's going to be really interesting to hear your thoughts on this topic as well. Same with Cannelle. We're going to be sharing about prayer. Now, the video that just got played again was a very interesting video I found, and main thing sort of for me, I think it showed, there's so many different ways that as believers we pray to God, and that we have quite a unique relationship, I would say, with how we can communicate with God compared to other faiths. Now, before we sort of get into some of the main points, I don't think it would be right for me to not, at least touch on where does this concept of prayer sort of come up, where does it come from? And I think from a Christian point of view, there's no better place to start really than in the book of Matthew, the gospel. And there's a section in chapter 6 where Jesus talks about prayer and the importance of prayer. And he says this, so from verse 5, he says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard of because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him."
Yeah.
And then Jesus goes into arguably one of the more famous parts of the Bible, which is the Lord's Prayer. "Our Father, who art in
Heaven,
hallowed be thy
name.
Thy kingdom."
come.
Yeah, I won't keep testing. Catch people
That could
out.
have got really nice.
But yeah, so he goes into the Lord's Prayer, and that's Jesus' sort of template of him saying, "This is how you should pray. This is how followers of me should pray." But I want to start my questions with the bit that comes from just before that with verse 8. Now Jesus says, "Don't be like them." So when he was talking about the pagans that just would say prayers, so many different words, and think that because they've said so many words, their prayers will be answered. He said, "Don't be like them, because your Father knows what you need before you ask him." So my question to both of you, I'll go to you first, Cannelle, is why do we need to pray if God already knows what we need? If Jesus has already said, well, God knows what you need, why are we also being told to pray at the same time?
That's a great question. First of all, I think it goes back to, I think there's been a theme of lately what I've shared on broadcast between 2 weeks ago and then Sunday Live, this Sunday that's just gone, where it's all about the relationship as well. Like if we didn't need to talk to him and bring things, it's basically like a robotic kind of relationship, or like a
like very one way, isn't
yeah,
it?
like we're robots and he's controlling us, or we're puppets. And then we're just doing whatever he makes us do, which is definitely not the point with God. It's a two-way relationship. It's a relationship. So a relationship means that there's two people interacting, and yeah, exactly. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a relationship. It would be like a dictatorship or something, but definitely not a relationship. So I think I think it's important because of that, because then it it makes you have a relationship with him. He's always there. He doesn't change. So if we're not coming to him, it's not that he's going away from us. It's just we're not coming close to him. So by praying is basically our way to interact with God, and he knows everything, yes, but he's not a dictator or a master to make us do things without our consent. First of all, and then it's also, for me, it's like kind of like a therapeutic way as well.
Yeah.
Like, because sometimes, you can just express any emotion, anything to God, and that is still prayer. And sometimes, because prayer is not just about asking things, it's about just interacting. Like, I don't always ask you both things because we're in a relationship. So, yeah, I think that would be the sum of my answer.
Brilliant answer.
Definitely. And exactly like you're saying, I think, prayer is our way of communicating with God. So I think, well, Jesus is saying, when you pray, don't pray like this because God knows, what you need. But I don't take that to mean so you don't need to pray, because it would be like Jesus saying, just don't bother communicating with God. Like you're saying, that would be like you're powerless in that situation. There's no relationship that needs to be there. He just knows what you need. So
And
I
you're
think
not
that's,
giving consent as well for him to act in your life.
yeah, exactly. Would you say, so if I ask you, Simeon, would you say there's a right way to pray versus a wrong way to pray? Or would you say you find it to be a bit more blurry than that?
I think it's whatever way works for you. I think everybody can interpret prayer in different ways, and everyone has their own way to pray. And what's necessarily right for Cannelle wouldn't be right for me, and what's right for me wouldn't be right for you. I think as long as your relationship and your foundations are strong with God, and it's like Cannelle said, a relationship that's two-way, then that's fine. Yeah, prayer is such a personal thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it's such a thing where we all do it at different times of the day. We all do it in a specific way. So for me, I like to cycle. I usually cycle through Vicky Park at 7 in the morning when the birds are still chirping and dogs are trying to chase after me. And that's when I kind of like to do it. And not only because it's in the nature, but that's that time before I get to work and I've got crazy children who are trying to ask me 10 million things, and that's that peaceful time where it's just me and the nature, and I can have that conversation in my head because it's a solid 20 minutes in the nature, and I can do that, and I can ask for things, and I can bless certain things and just get specific and just get a bit deep. So that's kind of when I like to pray and how I like to pray.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, and I think, Simeon, that's really good advice, because that's took me probably quite a long time to have that mindset that you've got of like, specifically, should I set out a specific time of the day to pray, sorry, and like for yourself, you're saying this, that's the time that with everything else I've got going on in my day, I can dedicate that time to be with God.
Yeah.
And if you found that it's been beneficial to you when you do make the time to do it that way?
Yeah, I think so. I think it just kind of, it allows me that time to just kind of just get those thoughts in my head, kind of order them up. And I don't specifically, I'll pray for this and I'll pray for this. It's not really like that. It's more, I'll kind of be grateful for certain things that might have happened. Or then I might kind of move into, okay, I'd like to bless me in this area, or bless me in that area. Or I might just kind of wish for things. And just, I try to do a little bit of each. I never kind of set out and go, oh, I'm going to pray for this today.
Right.
It just kind of almost whatever comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of doing it, actually. And we spoke on things like, writing down the blessings that you get and stuff like that. And I wonder if it's the same thing. It becomes almost contagious, doesn't it? When the more you start doing it, the more it becomes a nice habit that you can stick to.
And that's almost we've all kind of dipped into gratitude. We had a gratitude jar that we will use, and the book of blessings, we use that. And when you start looking at things positively and you start looking back and reflecting, oh, that went really well today, oh, that was fantastic, or when that happened, that made me feel incredible. When you start looking at those positive things, kind of deeply and just really reflecting on them, it's really, really helps, because then you get into that positive mindset, and it's not only, you don't only notice the things that are going well, you start to then notice the signs of when God's really working, and when God's really kind of coming, just shining his light on you and just kind of being there for you, and you can almost kind of connect the dots and you go, oh yeah, I prayed for that, and now this is really happening.
Yeah, definitely. How about, same question for you then, Cannelle, in terms of, is there a right way to pray for you versus a wrong way? In the general sense, would
Not
you
just
say?
personally.
No. Would you say generally there's a right way versus a wrong way?
So I would say there are ways to pray that would be wrong, and simply if they're not biblical ways to pray. But yeah, even like what you shared at the beginning, he literally just said, "Do not pray like they pray." So I think it goes back to the fact that God sees our hurt, and in 1 Samuel, he sees the hurt and he doesn't take care of the appearances that we may try to show off to other people. And there's sometimes we can't know obviously people's hurt, but it's prayer is not about you and other people, it's about you and God. So if it's all for appearances or in a fake way, or if it's like just to show off, like I pray louder than everyone and I raise my hands higher than everyone and I pray for longer than everyone, it's like, what are you doing it for? It's not a praying to God that you're doing. It's like you're putting on a show for other people, thinking that you're more holy than other people. So for me, that would be a wrong way to pray, or any other type of prayer that doesn't come from the heart and is not genuine to God. And then also there's this verse 1 John 5:14 that says, "This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us." And for me, that's a key point. If we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. So if we come and pray for things that we blatantly know is not his will, why? Why are you doing it? So I'm not saying that every time God doesn't answer a prayer, it meant that it wasn't his will, so you prayed wrong. But also the Bible gives us a lot of guidelines about what his will is in a general sense. And praying against these things would not be a good way to pray, a right way to pray.
And funnily enough, just on that, and I didn't know what Cannelle's answer was going to be, so we haven't planned this, but Cannelle did a brilliant preach Sunday just gone, so on the Sunday service, about, desiring after the things of God. And I think, like everything in the Bible, everything eventually becomes intertwined. It's not like these separate things that work separately from each other. And I think, it's a good, I would highly recommend, if you haven't caught last Sunday's service, to watch that at some point, because the word that you shared was really powerful in that sense of, the more that we start spending time with God, the more that we desire the things of God. Like the more we know of him, the more we're going to not necessarily want the things we wanted of the past, but we're going to want the things of God. And then that leads into then what we're going to pray about. The things I would have maybe prayed about 10 years ago are probably very different to what I would pray for now, because my relationship with God is developed. So I find myself almost being led to pray for certain things that maybe before I would have wanted material things for myself.
That, and also, I mean, if you're going away and praying for people to be cursed because they wronged you, that would be another wrong way to pray. Exactly.
Jesus, don't it?
It contradicts who the nature of God is. So these would be things that I would say are wrong. It doesn't mean that I say you're banned from ever praying, but I think it's very much basic to summarize. It has to come from the heart. It has to be genuine, whatever the emotion is behind. I mean, there's times where a journey was like, I don't want to forgive this person. I hate them. But I'm like, I'm being honest right now, God, but I know also I have to change my heart. And I think it's about that honesty, but how is your heart behind that honesty?
I think what you just said was interesting, though, in regards to... sorry, mind blank. In regards to asking God for direction and your ideas and your goals versus God's ideas and God's goals. So I think everybody can relate to that, and that's like a constant balance because
Yeah.
even in a 5-10 year time span, that will really change.
Yeah.
And it's that constant tightrope. We're all human. We all want certain things, and we all want to get to a certain level, maybe materialistically, maybe not career-wise. But then it's also putting that trust in God and just being like, okay, this is the situation I'm in. I can handle it. You obviously put me in it for a reason. I'm just going to turn my trust over to you and just kind of know that you know what's right for me, and know that this is happening for a reason. It might not make sense yet, but there's a plan here.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's really hard.
Really hard. And I think, only really God can give us that wisdom to be able to even pray like that.
Yeah.
And that takes time. Like, it's going to be very rarely that someone just naturally will just think, yeah, my life seems like it's falling apart, but what will be will be. You kind of, God gives you that wisdom and that trust to think, like you're saying, Simeon, yeah, despite this, God, I'm going to still choose to trust in you.
Remembering that, I can't remember the specific quote or the specific line, but it's something along the lines of, God only gives you as much as you can handle.
Yeah.
Or never, too much.
Yeah, you won't be tempted more than you can handle in
the
situation.
It gives you enough to carry. It's not too much of an overload. So.
And that in all temptation, he's giving you a way out.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's always a choice.
Yeah. One of I would say the best bits of wisdom I remember ever getting told was someone saying to me, you can ask God how to pray.
Yeah.
Because, and we're going to touch on this a bit later on, different styles of praying and what are some of the challenges. But I know for me, that was almost like a weight lifted off my shoulder, because early days, you think praying needs to be a certain way. But, when someone said, if you don't know how to pray, ask God. So sometimes I just think, yeah, God, I don't know what to pray for this situation, or I don't know how I feel about this, and it's so amazing to think that we can go to God for those things. And it's very freeing when you start thinking like that, because otherwise you almost have this part of your life that you would give to God willingly, and you have another part that you keep to yourself because you think, I haven't figured it out in the right way to tell God. But God knows, as Jesus said, he knows what you needed anyway. A lot of times it's for us just getting that out there and then trusting that God will give you the wisdom back. Before we sort of move on to some of these points, I want to touch on another bit that I'm saying. So where Jesus is saying, don't be like the hypocrites. They love to pray standing in the synagogues and on street corners. They love to be seen by other people. Do you think that means then that Jesus is saying we shouldn't pray in public? Because obviously we've all seen prayers in public. I've prayed on the camera before. But do you think, I've been doing something wrong? Jesus is actually saying, don't be like those people that go out and just pray for everyone to see.
I think there's a difference. I think it depends on your intent and your heart. And, there's some people that are doing it because they're seeking validation, right? And they want to be seen and they want to be heard because it makes them feel good. And that, kind of boosts their ego a little bit. But on the other hand, you can do it publicly because you're spreading that love and you're spreading that news and you've got really good intentions for that person. It's not about glorifying yourself or, making your head a bit big. It's about spreading the right kind of message. So I think you can do it publicly, but it really depends on the intent and the message and heart behind it.
Yeah. I hear that.
Well, yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same. It all comes down to the intention behind. And then humanly, we see things and we think, wow, and then that doesn't mean that's how God sees it.
Yeah.
So that's just something to remember. I'm not saying that every time you've seen someone go loudly and pray, that meant their heart wasn't right. But don't focus on what you see, and because that won't lead you anywhere.
But we're humans. So I set up a Facebook page this week for a business I've just started, and in the back of my head I'm going, because I preach this all the time, the reason I don't want an Instagram and a YouTube is because I don't think it'd be good for my mental health, and I don't want my ego to get big, because I shy away from all of that, and I've seen how it affects people in the media and all of that, and I'm like, okay, be smart, don't do any of that. But then I set up this Facebook page, and in the back of my head I'm like, okay, don't pay attention to any of the likes, it's not about the likes. And I keep checking it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm nearly at 100. So it's just, it's so hard. You know what the right answer is, and you know that you don't want to get sucked into all of that because not only is it not Christian, but it doesn't go anywhere, and it's not good for the soul, and it's not good for the head. But we live in a culture and society where it's almost all about validation and individualism and materialism. It's all about that. So it's so
knowing
hard.
identity in God, isn't it?
You know,
Definitely.
Ben is saying,
Oh yeah,
no,
thanks.
he's answering to your question. He's saying, no, he's talking about the motive being seen to be a praying person. What Sim said.
Brilliant. And yeah, so the laptop's a bit too far away from me this week to see people's comments. So yeah, Cannelle, if you see people adding, feel free to let us know. But yeah, exactly the example you give, I think is a brilliant, for me, analogy of that situation. My kind of understanding when I read that verse is, at that time Jesus was writing culturally, not just because of where it was geographically in the world, but the time, it was very different to culturally now. And my understanding is back then, if you were a religious leader, you would be held in very high esteem. You would be a somebody. So, to go about and be seen to be the one that's praying and holy and everything, you would have a lot of respect upon you, whether it's true or not. I think nowadays, it's in a broader sense probably less. I think it still would happen within the church in certain aspects. I don't deny that, but in a broader, like if I just went around in Ashford town like preaching, probably more people are going to think I'm crazy than respectable. But I think a good analogy is that social media thing. It's still, you see that the heart has been with us for thousands of years. Exactly. It's, putting something out. You see it all the time, and I'm not saying I've never been guilty of it, because I don't think it's like a malicious thought. But like sometimes I've seen people on Instagram where they'll like post an inspiring quote, but it will be someone posing at the beach, and I'll think, what's the link? I'm a bit confused what the link is. So I'm thinking, it was that quote just to get you likes or stuff. Do you see what I mean? Or I've seen people post something that just seemed wildly against how someone seems to live their life. I wouldn't judge and say you're living your life wrong. But sometimes you can see things where you think you're saying the right thing that will get you liked.
So your appearance and behaviour doesn't really match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's what Jesus was getting at with these people. Like, I agree exactly what you're saying. I think it's the heart, isn't it? It's not that praying in public is wrong. And there's loads of instances in the Bible you see people have prayed very publicly and God has honoured it. I think it's Jesus is saying, don't be like those people who obviously they don't have the heart. And you see in the Gospels loads of times Jesus is almost calling out these Pharisees and saying, you act on the surface one way, but in your heart you don't care really about your relationship with God. You care about your own reputation. So I think that's a really good point. Apologies to anyone watching as well. I've got my questions on my phone, so if I keep dipping back to my phone, I'm not distracted. I'm just trying to get the questions. So
2021.
There's some that I want to ask, but I don't want to go straight into this right now. Grab that if you want to.
The timing was just
The
timing was just perfect.
It's all right. So we keep it moving. I'll go to you, Cannelle, as we lost our guest. What would you say now on sort of like a personal level are some of the main benefits of prayer that you found?
I think there's quite a lot. It depends. I don't think we experience all the benefits at once all the time. Sometimes we go back on some benefits, but there's definitely like a release of anxiety. Like in Philippians 4:6, which I think you're going to share anyway afterwards. But yeah, so praying just lifts up the worrying, the anxiousness, the stress, I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. Doesn't mean the situation changed the moment you prayed, but your attitude towards it has changed. And then it brings peace, it brings insight, wisdom, could go on. It brings a lot. It obviously brings blessings. It can bring very tangible things like healing. It can bring miracles. It can bring financial stability. Like the things that you ask, when they're answered, they're obviously benefits that you get from prayers. But then, other than that, it's just, your heart is transformed, your attitude and your character and your behavior are transformed as well. Step by step, you're like, oh, I used to be like that, and I'm not, because you pray, and then your relationship with God grows. Your The way you see others, the way you see yourself as well, the way you see God. I mean, all of that changes. I could go on for a long time, so feel free to stop me.
That was already a lot. I mean, I think probably Cannelle's covered.
Is there anything left for me to
say? Took it from us, but yeah, on a personal level, I'll just add to it. I find, for me, when I pray about things, probably one of the main benefits is the peace. Because it's, of course, amazing when you prayed for something and God answers you specifically with that thing. That's amazing. But I find a lot of times is almost like I feel like after I've prayed, I almost think to myself, God, I think you just wanted me to pray that, so I reminded myself.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I feel like, oh man, I didn't pray then, and then God just disappeared. Not that, but I feel like there's sometimes I'm stressing and then I pray. And then it's almost like I'm reminding myself, why am I stressed? I've got God. And then I feel like I've asked it, so I've got nothing to worry about now. Again, I think it comes with that relationship developing with God, where you get to the point of being able to be a bit more peaceful with whatever's God's will, you'll be happy with. And I'll be lying if I said I'm perfect at that. But I'm better than I was when I first came to faith. So I find it now is not so much about I've prayed, so now I know I'll get what I asked. It's more I've prayed, so I feel like I've done my bit. Do you know what I mean? I'm talking to God. I trust that He's heard. But like I say, more so, I just feel peaceful. Like, yeah, why was I stressing? God was there.
So we have
exactly.
We have Rachel Fawkes saying it brings connection, relationship, and intimacy with God. And your lovely mom, Sharon, said, I think Jesus was giving us permission to have direct relationship with God. We no longer need priests to intercede for us.
Yeah, really good point as well, because a lot of other religions in the world, prayer is obviously a part of those religions as well. It's natural for humans to want to communicate with who they see as God, but I've always found Christianity to be quite unique.
Our version of Christianity.
Yeah.
Because there's some that would even go through someone else.
But that ability to just go to God. There's not like a set routine I would need to do before I'm worthy to do that, or I don't need to think, well, God would maybe answer my prayer, but I'm not holy enough for God to do that. But if I go to my pastor and he does it on my behalf, maybe God would hear that. I think it's beautiful, Jesus just saying you can communicate with God. God cares about you. He wants that relationship with you.
We've got Ian saying prayer often corrects your own attitude and perspective on the world, the situation, yourself, and of course God.
It just and I think it gives you a new insight, and a new perspective on many situations, many things, really.
Definitely. And keep the questions and comments coming, because it's really good to hear what you guys are thinking. So
I feel relaxed now, so comment away.
I'll go to you now, Simeon. Did anyone ever teach you how to pray?
There wasn't anyone specifically, but I remember when I first kind of came into the Christian world 8 years ago, to the Christian lifestyle. 8 years ago, I kind of just observed people and just kind of picked things up. I remember watching certain people and I was like, wow, they pray for a really long time, and that's really deep, and I don't know if I can pray for that long and make it sound that sophisticated. It's almost like an art form, and they were really articulate. And then I watched a few other people and they were like really short and sharp. And I thought, well, are they right? Because their prayer's not long enough. But it like I said before, it's a personal thing, isn't it? And one isn't necessarily better than the other. It's what works for you. So I'd say I've kind of picked things up over the years, and I'd say that It's actually come more naturally, obviously. Just as time goes on, really. So it just gets easier, and I find that it actually flows more. But in the beginning, years ago, I used to almost get a bit stuck, and I was like, oh, what do I say next? But now, with in my opinion, with the wisdom and the faith and all of that, it just naturally flows out.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And I mean, same for you. Did anyone ever teach you how to pray?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the church, so by default, family, church, Sunday school teachers, friends. So I always was around prayer, so I got a lot of insight from a very young age for that. There's obviously people that have impacted me more, but yeah, I'd say it was a 26-year-old journey.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I totally have nailed it and I'm like perfect in knowing how to pray. I don't think we would ever be, because we're never getting there. We're always on the journey. But to go back on what you were saying, I think it's a good thing to say. Like, some people will pray very long prayers, some people will pray very short prayers. Does it mean, like, do you have to pray one specific way? I don't think so. Although the Bible does say that there's times for specific seasons, specific times in your life where you might need to pray a more very specific way, and that's usually more like with fasting and like intercession and this kind of way, and all the times where you need to bring other people in as well. So I think this is lots of ways. And yeah, I don't know if that would be a question for later, but I'll answer it now. The Bible also says to pray continually, and for a long time I was like really stuck. I was like, does it mean I literally have to be like, Abba Father, blah 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 blah, for the whole day, 24/7? And I got really stuck on that as a kid because I just couldn't understand it. I was like, that's like a whole job to actually be continuous. I was like, this is a long thing, and I was often surrounded by people that could do these types of prayers. I was just like, that's not me. I just, I
you
can't.
probably feel unholy.
Basically. And then I figured it out for me personally, where it was like, well, pray continually means something different for everyone. And for me, it's like, but it's not that I'm 24/7 constantly making a purposeful prayer, but first of all, there's the attitude that changes. So you're kind of always in connection with God anyway. But also, I would just do very quick thing every now and then throughout the whole day. So it might be that I'll be stuck on something for when I'll be, oh God, please help me. But it might be like very quick, very short and sharp, very
but you meant
precise.
it.
Exactly. For me, it's meant as a prayer, and it's like sometimes it doesn't even sound like a prayer if someone could hear me. But I know for me it is prayer. So for me, that would be
as long as it works for you.
Exactly.
And it's communication, isn't it? Because there's times where a certain situation will mean I need to be quite expressive with my words to Cannelle, but that wouldn't suit every situation. Like certain times, I just need to be like, Cannelle, can you quickly help me with this? It's gonna just be pointless for me to go into some nice poetic explanation of why I need your help. And I think the principles can be the same with God. You know what I mean? Like we keep going back to, Jesus told us God already knew your heart and knew what you needed before you asked it. And I think, it's not that praying long prayers are wrong, because like you're saying, there's different needs for different times.
And some people suits them.
Exactly. But it might, even if that's a gift you have, it might not suit every occasion. And I wonder if maybe if you get yourself in a habit of always praying long prayers, would you end up in a situation maybe where you become slightly like the Pharisees Jesus is talking about, where you are just saying the words because you know what to say, but you don't really believe in what you're saying. You don't really want to say what you're saying. And it leads me to one of my other questions that I've written down. I'm happy for any of you to take it. Have you ever felt pressured to pray in a situation where you didn't want to? Now, I'm not obviously looking for you to name and shame, but just...
That's a shame, I've got a list on it.
That's for the post 9 o'clock.
Man, Rachel was just saying, Simeon, you're growing so well, fantastic to see. And now... Just kidding.
No, I agree.
She did
Rachel.
say that though.
But yeah, have any of you felt? I mean, I'm happy for you to go first, Sim. Like, have you ever felt pressured, as in, like, I feel like people are telling me to pray in this situation, but I don't really feel comfortable praying right now.
I don't know if I'd say a specific situation, but I'd probably say, kind of linking to what we just said. You know, when I first kind of became Christian, I can even remember we'd hang out with, you know, good friends of ours, and you guys would all pray in a certain way, maybe even for a length of time. And I'd pray in my head too. I think I was a bit almost agnostic at the time, and I'm sure. And then I'd open my eyes, and everybody would still be in prayer, and I'm like, okay, do I go back into prayer, or do I just like wait it out till we're all done? So
a lot of people would have had their eyes open as well at different points without you realizing. That's a common thing.
Not pressure in a certain situation, but pressure at a certain time, and maybe pressure to pray a little bit deeply, or maybe for a specific length of time. So there hasn't really been a situation where I felt like I haven't prayed hard enough, but yeah, it's more a type of way to pray.
I get that completely, and I think, funny enough, it's funny how things work, because I've felt the same in early situations myself. I guarantee you it's quite a common thing. Same question for you, Cannelle. Have you ever felt pressured to pray in a situation where you didn't want to? And how was that experience for you?
I still do, but they're basically the same. I genuinely believe that everyone's called to pray, but some people have specific gifts of intercession and praying in very specific ways, and that's not me. I have to be honest. That's not where God gifted me. Not that I'm aware of, and I hate it. I have to say it with strong word, because that's how it feels. I just really hate when I'm being put on the spot. Like, all right, you go and pray in public, and that really throws me. And that's when I'll be making a prayer for the show, because I'm just like, oh, I've got to pray in a way that people will say was a good prayer. It's not good. So if anyone out there wanted to put me on the spot and ask me to pray, think about it twice.
And does it take away the realness of what you would pray for?
Definitely, it does. Like, even with Joel, there's plenty of time where I just can't do it out loud to him. I mean, he's probably the closest person to me after God. So it's not about the person. It's genuinely just it's not something I'm comfortable with, and that would make me go away from real prayer. Because I'll be starting to be thinking about all sorts of things that we've seen in the beginning. But saying that, there are times where I know God specifically told me, no, you need to do it, and that was fine, but that was very specific as well.
I got more comfortable with it over time. So that a certain friend who called me up, he's one of my best Christian friends, and actually responsible in a way for me kind of being here. But he's the guy that will call me, and you know, he'll always say at the end, "God, can I pray for you?" And then I'll pray back. And that's one situation. There's another very close group of friends of mine who I'm at their house all the time, and you know, we have dinner occasionally, and they'll pray, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll kind of chip in there when I can, and if I can. So I've got better at it, but I'm good in like close social situations, but I don't necessarily feel comfortable kind of walking on the street and going up to strangers and praying for people in that way. I think that would be a bit daunting and a bit hard.
Weirdly enough, that's not something I always felt weird about, but because it's not something I would do constantly. There's more some things. There's times I know God prompted me to pray for specific people, or to join, like in conferences or things like that, to join the prayer team, which you know, and you're preparing yourself to have to pray for people that you don't know anything about, which is very daunting. But I know when you know, all right, God's in it with me, for some reason you just like grow wings of courage or something.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's another question I'm going to go on to in a minute, but I think, that's reminding me of in 1 Corinthians 12, which is something we'll go into a bit more, where it's talking about many members of the body and how it works in harmony. And I think exactly what you two are saying is that you see that, prayer is something that is a bigger word. It's communicating with God. So we can all communicate with God, but there's different ways prayer can be used. And I definitely believe people will be gifted almost in certain ways to pray differently. I've seen people that I think they're truly gifted in prayer. Even some people I can be around and just hearing them prayer, I just feel encouraged and inspired. I think maybe not even just how you pray, it can be maybe your personality. So I've always felt very similar to you, funnily enough, and yourself, is that I don't like actually praying publicly. I feel I genuinely, and probably my answer is one that I think can make people think, what? He's got to be lying. Is I would say like I pray all the time. But what I mean is it's just genuinely, I think I'm always thinking of God. And I don't mean this in a show off way. It's just, I think I'm always, he's on my mind, or I'll just be thinking this.
Yeah.
My attitude with everything is usually I just think, I've got to pray about that. Or I've got to, let's just quickly pray about this, Cannelle. But publicly, I don't necessarily feel that I'm particularly gifted in publicly praying. But I feel that personality-wise, I've got a personality where I like to, in certain situations, I just like to throw myself into it. So I had the same feelings when I first became a Christian of like, I don't know how to do this. Or someone would just randomly say to me, Joel, can you just pray for the meal? And I'd think, what? I don't know what you mean. But my personality is such where I'd think, cool, challenge accepted. Like, let me give this a go. But I've always thought for some people, that would be the worst nightmare. And that would probably always put you in a stressful situation where you're thinking, oh, please don't ask me, please don't ask me. So I think, maybe I've got a certain personality that benefited me in certain ways. And in a marriage, we've seen how that's played out kind of well, because it's not that I love to pray publicly, but it's like in my mind, I see it as, well, that's my responsibility. Like, as the head of the household, like, I want to be praying publicly. It's not that you're not praying, I just mean, if Cannelle's saying, I don't feel comfortable to pray that out loud, I'll feel, I'm happy to do that for that situation. So I think there's so many different ways that God gifts us.
We've got some interesting
go for it.
things. So we have Sarah Mantiziba saying, many people find praying difficult, which is why Jesus taught us how to pray. Agreed. We have Ian said, what about private prayer versus group prayer? And then he said challenge accepted. I'm not sure what the challenge is.
Let's clarify that.
We'll get that clarification. But no, very, very good points. And again, sorry, Sam, go for it.
No, sorry. I have a question for you guys. Do you have a specific time of the day that you guys pray?
Good question. Well, I've kind of touched on it. I think I generally, I just pray a lot. But one thing I do, and a good friend of mine, unfortunately, passed away, but one time he had an alarm go off on his phone, and I remember asking him, like, I was curious what it was for, and he was telling me he set an alarm at 12 o'clock every day to remind him to do the Lord's Prayer. And I was kind of curious, and then I was thinking, I like that concept, because it's every day he's going to be dedicating a bit of time to God, like you're saying. I started setting in the alarm. That's kind of transition. So now every morning, pretty much without fail, I will always say the Lord's Prayer first thing when I wake up, before I get out of bed, before I do anything. And it's massively helped. And it's helped me even in a small way. Whereas if you ask most people, what's the first thing you do when you wake up? It's go on my phone. Because I've got this thing.
Guilty.
Technically, it's not the first thing I do, because in my head, I'm like, I need to pray the Lord's Prayer. And I feel that for myself, it just sets me up right. It's like God then becomes the first thing that I thought of when I woke up.
Yeah.
And there's principles in the Lord's Prayer, like give us today our daily bread, forgive us our sins, stuff like that. It's like it covers all the things that I would want to be covered.
Or even just saying thank you for, this is something that I'm aware of but need to get into the habit of, is waking up and just saying thank you for the day.
Yeah.
How many people just don't, without sounding kind of macabre and grim, how many people don't wake up? And, we get to every day. So what I'm kind of saying is life is a blessing. We should just take every day as we can.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. For me, it's a bit like Joel. Like this, well, I said it earlier, actually pray continually, but just not things that you think sometimes are prayers, but for me it is. But there is a few specific times where we pray, like around meal times, or one other is before I sleep. The last thing I have to do is I have a very specific prayer that I've tailored to myself, which is it's not the Lord's Prayer, but it's like a very specific prayer where I pray very specific set things, and it's always the same things every single night. And that includes about Joel's sleep, because I've noted, well, for a while, do you mind?
No.
For a while, Joel was having some trouble with breathing during his sleep. Kind of some scary things happen, and then since then, I've started praying a very specific thing for that every night. You've been
Fine.
Every time I do it. I pray for all my friends, family, colleagues, neighbors to find the Lord, to be all good, because throughout the day I would pray for very specific things. If I know someone's going through something, I need prayer for something. But at that time, I know I cover it because I know what I think, and it's covered there. I pray for a marriage, for growing in closer to God. Some very specific things, and that really helps me. It's like at the end of the day, and it's like it's all been covered in one sense, but for me it's like very disciplinary.
Yeah, and you're really good at that, I have to say, because I will always try and pray before I sleep, but that's where I probably struggle the most, is because when I'm tired. It's like I will pray, but I'll be kind of half falling asleep. But Cannelle's really good at, like, she will always pray. Definitely, and like you're saying, I've seen the benefits.
Yeah,
for sure.
There was the question from Ian. What about private prayer versus group prayer?
As in, is it good? Is it bad? I'll make an interpretation of that question. I feel that there's different reasons or benefits for different situations. You know, certain things I do feel private prayer. I'm talking just personally. I'm not necessarily saying biblically. Personally, there's certain situations where I've found more like connected with God to pray that privately, and there's certain situations where I think, in the same way, as much as generally speaking, I wouldn't feel naturally good praying in public. There has been times where I think God's, told me, no, this is a public setting right now. So certain times when you're praying for people, I've had situations where maybe someone's sick or someone's going away on a journey, whatever it is. And I think public prayer is really powerful. And I've been involved in it, and I've been on the receiving end of it, where it's been really beneficial.
So Brian, it's frozen.
Guys, drop us a comment if this is frozen. Have you checked the internet?
Hello?
We still here?
It's gonna be... Well, I think it's... This is YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not frozen.
Yeah, so we're still live. Apologies, guys. I might have to take Cannelle off comment duty.
Ian has to go.
She's completely confusing me. But I think there's one sort of last topic that I want to jump onto. It's okay.
Go for another hour.
Cool, thanks. So yeah, sorry guys, if it did freeze for some reason, I'm sorry, but yeah, let us know. I'm seeing a few comments.
No, they're saying all good is back now.
Cool. So yeah, let us. Well, it'd be hard if we do freeze, but try and let us know if we freeze again. Within that, there was one little bit to touch on, which is grace, which I think is a big one that like every Christian does. For me, it wasn't normal. I didn't really grow up saying grace for food, and then I saw loads of people say
grace.
Yeah, sorry, like praying for your meal.
I thought you meant to pray with grace.
And I love the concept of it. And there's just an interesting thing I noticed since becoming a Christian, where I would say I've noticed that praying for your meal is quite a public thing for most people, and for me it was always a very private thing when I started doing it. So I genuinely pray before everything I eat.
I agree. I've seen it. Even sometimes he'll just drink water and he'll pray for it.
Yeah, and because I'm not saying like and that's my point why it's interesting, because I've been in settings with other Christians where the meals come and then we start eating and people have almost been like, oh, so you don't pray for your food? And then in my head I've been like, yeah, I did. I prayed for all of us. But I was thinking, I don't know why that needed to be public. Like, well, of course I'm praying for the food. Yeah. But I found it just interesting is that seems to be something that for most people is very public. For me, it wasn't. And I think it's interesting as well is that sometimes, people have different ways of praying.
Yeah, it's almost perceived that it should be a public thing. I think it's just almost part of maybe a culture, maybe it's the norm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had comments like that before as well, where
Yeah.
people have come to me and said, "Oh, is your faith all right? Because you don't seem to be praying anymore." And I'm like, I didn't know I needed to come to do it in front of your face, but yeah.
Definitely. Well, we've pretty much got to the 8 o'clock mark, but there's still one more topic that I want to touch on. And I don't think we'll need to spend ages on it, but I do think it's a very big one that comes up. And that's to do with praying in tongues. And I think ultimately, it's a topic in and of itself, if we want it to be. But I think it's worth, touching on it with this topic
So
here.
briefly.
Yeah. And
as brief as we can.
Yeah. There's different references to this concept of praying in tongues in the Bible. And due to time, I won't read out, everything, but you can
find 3 chapters.
Yeah, because there's so much, but you see that
we can say the chapters.
The early disciples started doing it in the book of Acts, when the Holy Spirit came on them, and it said that they were speaking in what sounded like crazy tongues, but then other people say, wait, he's speaking my language, or he's speaking my language. But then there's other references to being able to speak in tongues, and again, the book of 1 Corinthians is really, there's a lot in that. So 1 Corinthians chapter 12, it talks about there being different kinds of spiritual gifts, speaking in tongues being one of them. And just an interesting point to note, it says the same Spirit is the source of them all. So I think that's important to note when we're speaking about even the gift of tongues. But in chapter 14 is where Paul's talking about, love should be ultimately the highest gift that we aim to have above all things. But he's saying that ultimately tongues in a public setting is a very personal thing. It's very edifying for yourself. But if other people are seeing it and the tongues are not being interpreted, then it may not benefit the church, because someone else hearing it will think, I don't have a clue what's being said.
They might think that you're crazy if they're unbelievers.
Exactly. So again, I find it interesting because I've heard arguments from both sides of, I've seen situations where people pray in tongues very publicly, and I've even myself thought, I don't know what's going on. But I've also heard the other where people, are almost saying that you shouldn't even do this thing called praying in tongues. Yeah. But then I'm thinking, well, no, Paul's not saying it's wrong. He's just saying that
he's giving a setting of giving wisdom around how and when to pray in tongues. And I mean, he's saying, like you said, he's giving lots of different types of gifts that we can get from God, including praying in tongues in 1 Corinthians 12. And then in Corinthians 14, he would say, I'd rather you seek for the gift of prophecy than speaking in tongues. Although he does also say, I wish everyone could speak in tongues. But he still gives some settings around it of when that's the case in a public setting, let's say in the church, then someone should come to not translate. I'll say translate because I can't find the word. Oh, that's the word in English? Yeah. Okay, to translate it in the language that we would know in the place we are in. And he also even explains that, he says, for anyone who speaks in a tongue does not speak to people but to God. Indeed, no one understands them. They utter mysteries by the Spirit. But the one who prophesies speaks to people for their strengthening, encouraging, and comfort. Anyone who speaks in a tongue edifies themselves, but the one who prophesies edifies the church. I would like every one of you to speak in tongues, but I would rather have you prophesy. The one who prophesies is greater than the one who speaks in tongues, unless someone interprets.
Yeah.
So that the church may be edified. Now, brothers and sisters, if I come to you and speak in tongues, what good will I be to you, unless I bring you some revelation or knowledge or prophecy or word of instruction? So I think for me, what's important with praying in tongues is that it is about between you and God, is to edify yourself. And we don't know what we're saying, but in a church setting, will there to serve the church as a whole. And I've seen times where I was in church, and then it was on a prayer meeting on a Tuesday evening. So the chances that people outside would come is always really low, because you don't advertise it for unbelievers to come on your prayer meeting usually. And then someone started talking tongues, and then it started everyone talking, and then some people were like literally shouting and screaming in tongues. And then I was at the back of the church with some friends, and then two guys came in, first time ever they stepped into a church. They came in, they sat just before in front of us, and then obviously they had to come in the moment people started screaming in tongues, and they looked at each other like, these people are literally the craziest people I've ever seen. They started laughing and they left. And it's like, well, what do you do? For me, that really brings me back to that. It's not that it's wrong, but I just personally think there's a way to do it within the church that Paul teaches us about, for a wise way to use it. And he's not saying it's wrong to do it. He's just giving us a wiser way to do it, to edify the church, which is the purpose of meeting in the church.
Cool. How about yourself, Sim? Like, what's your experience being of tongues? And then we can go and get then if people have commented as well.
It's such a hard one. It's such a deep topic.
So is it something you, firstly, is it something you feel that you do?
It's not
or that
something
you've
that
done?
I do. It's not something I feel like could do or have the power or knowledge to do currently. But I'd be open to learning or interpreting it and exploring it. But it's also, it's definitely it's obviously got its place, and I respect it. And it's certain people's way of communicating to God, and that's fine. Everybody's got their way of communicating to God. Just because we don't necessarily understand it, it doesn't make it any less than, or any less powerful than a regular word. It's just another interpretation of the word, and it's just your own way of communicating. So to be honest, it's just something I'm still trying to work out and understand and comprehend. But I can definitely see how powerful it is, and how some people really get a lot from that.
Yeah. No, very interesting.
My mom says house to the three of us.
Hi,
Mom.
Hey.
Any other comments about
So
this
we've
topic?
had Ian said, I think foremost it's a beautiful gift for private prayer when you haven't got words to pray or when you don't know what to pray. And then Rachel said, it's wonderful to pray in tongues when you don't know what to pray yourself. It really helps to edify your inner man.
Definitely. And I think, again, I mean, it's specifically spoken about as like a gift of the Spirit. And like you were saying, Sim, which I really agree with, it's even if we're feeling that we can't do it or we don't feel comfortable, whatever it is, it doesn't mean, like you were saying, it's not something I feel like I can do at the moment, but I'd be open to it. And I think that's the attitude to have with all spiritual gifts. But I think as well, for anyone watching that feels like I find it confusing or I don't really get it, I would also say, take heart as well, because, the Bible teaches us that we are to desire all the gifts, but it doesn't mean we get them all at once, or we may naturally be inclined towards certain gifts and there may be certain situations for another gift. Who knows? And I say that because even myself, when I first became a Christian, tongues became arguably one of my biggest sticking points within the faith, because I went to a church where they were kind of doing it, and obviously at first I thought it was weird, but that wasn't the problem. Like you're saying, Sim, you can respect it in a sense. I think God gives you a grace when you come in a relationship to understand, I may not get this now, but I'm curious. My issue was because then obviously it was, why can't I do it? And I was asking God, like, yeah, can I do it? Can I do it? And then it wasn't happening. And then I'd almost like given God a time limit, like surely after this amount of months I can do it. And then I'm not saying people's advice was wrong. It's just obviously people say, no, but just do this, or just do it and it will kind of come. And I felt really uncomfortable with that.
I remember a lot of people saying that.
Yeah. And again, I preface that by saying, I'm not saying, that is a wrong approach, but I want to be real when I'm on this show and just be honest with how I felt. And I know for myself, I felt a bit uncomfortable, and I took it internally and thought, well, I'm probably not saved, because if if it's not happening and these people are telling me it will just happen and it's still not happening, and I confused a lot of things. Like I'd read in the Bible a little bit saying like there's a sin you could commit against the Holy Spirit and you'll never be forgiven. And I was going down that path and thinking, I must have done that because why else could I not speak tongues? And it did actually stay with me for a long time. I really just, everything else I felt peaceful about the faith. But then I thought, because I don't speak this strange language, I must not be saved. And eventually, God gave me a peace, trust me, you're saved. You do
Your
know
salvation
me.
is not about
Exactly. And then I would realize, just as tongues is a gift, there's other gifts. And almost supernaturally, I feel like I can do these things, which is proving to me it must be a gift of God, because why would I be able to do this and this? So again, it's something that I'd say you can always be open to, always pray into. I think just as importantly, praying for the ability to interpret. Like I often see people that can speak tongues,
but then rarely.
Don't think I've never seen someone that
I've seen it once and it was really sick.
Wow.
It was so cool. Because it was one of those where it was like, another thing that I don't understand what's going on. Because it always happens and I'm just like, but then someone came after and literally interpreted it. And I was like, that's so cool. And then it made what Paul says more like, wow, that's like so much more powerful, because obviously the person didn't know what they were saying in tongues, but then someone came in and interpreted it, and it was for the church as well, which for me, that's the key thing. It's like, we've seen a few comments about it as well, where praying in tongues is to edify yourself, but if there's interpretation, it will edify the church as well. Which for me, when you go to church, when you meet people, is to edify, serve others. So we've got people saying, Sharon said, a gift of the Spirit to be led by the Spirit. Sarah said, that's true, Cannelle. People who don't have an understanding of praying in tongues struggle when they visit the church or prayer meeting and people start praying in tongues. And Ian said, all the other gifts are to edify others. Tongues is the only gift to edify yourself.
I think as well, just if I can make one last point on the topic of gifts, I think we just need to be aware of our gifts more, and the fact that we might not be good at one thing doesn't mean that we're not brilliant at other things. You guys have been blessed with music. I'm pretty good with people and want to welcome to. We've all got something to do and to contribute and to serve, and not even just from a biblical perspective. As a guy that works with children, I think there's almost a lack of getting children to understand, because why not start with them as they grow up, getting children to understand what their gifts are and just kind of honing that and developing that and just kind of using that in a good way. I don't really think it's explored enough, and I think as even as a society and as a culture, I think that if everyone kind of cultivates that and realizes that how many people are doing things that they really want to do, and I think if we can kind of cultivate that and just unearth it a little bit more and tap into it, how amazing would things be if everybody kind of realizes their gifts and gives back.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Really, really good point.
Would I finish well?
Yeah, it's a great point. And look, I know we've gone over time, so I kind of want to wrap this up now. I think tongues, the idea of it and the principle of it is maybe something that we come back at some point and unpack it a bit more, because it is a very big topic. But I hope that what we've been able to share throughout the whole session has been useful. The comments we've really appreciated, because it also adds to our understanding and learning as well, as we all go through this together. Are there any last sort of points that you guys have, or any last bits you just want to share?
I'd say if people may question how do you deal with unanswered prayers, we've not really touched on that much.
That's true.
You can then go back on 2 weeks ago, the previous session, because we did touch on that.
Yeah, exactly.
So even though it was on a very specific topic, it's applicable for everything.
Yeah, Definitely.
So first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Thanks
Sim.
for
Been itching to get in here for about a year. I've been watching and thinking, oh, when can I get on? But no, it's been beautiful. Thanks for watching me out there, all 8 of you or 9 of you. It's been lovely. I kind of want to end with Philippians 4:16. So don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done.
Amen.
So it's not only something I need to remind myself of, but something I think we just all need to remind each other of. Just celebrate the good, celebrate what's happened, and be grateful for what is happening now and what is to come.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, I
Well,
like that.
there's no better way to finish, in my opinion. Amazing verse. Simeon, we've been blessed to have you. Thanks for your wisdom. Cannelle, thanks as always. And thanks as always, all you guys, for joining us. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with another unsubscribed session. But obviously, the church has other broadcasts throughout the week. The next one being Friday. No.
Well, I don't know. Is it online? Can someone tell us if Encounter will be online?
Yeah, let us know if
Yeah.
Encounter will be online, because that is happening on
happening
Friday.
on Friday.
And you can get info throughout the church from the church Facebook page about that, and then obviously Sunday service. But again, thanks for joining us. We pray that you have a blessed week, and we will see
Enjoy
you
the sunshine.
Yeah.
And go
please.
pray in the nature with the sunshine.
soon. Definitely.
Bye.
Take care.
See ya.